The Packers have the best group of young receivers in the NFL, and I honestly can't remember the last time a team had this level of success drafting this position over such a short time period, especially from a volume perspective. Obviously, a team like Cincinnati that gets T. Higgins and Jamar Chase in back-to-back drafts would clear them right now, but I think it's pretty historic the strength and numbers that Green Bay has of young receivers that have produced in the NFL and are still developing with a lot of upside. Over the last 2 drafts, the Packers have taken 6 wide receivers, and outside of Samori Toure and Grant DuBose, who were 7th round picks that you can't really expect to produce, I think the other 4 receivers Green Bay has drafted have all been hits, at least on the field, and they have as bright of a future as anyone at that position. But because there are so many promising young players, it's a real unknown how the hierarchy is going to sort itself out and who, if anyone, emerges as the quote-unquote number 1. So in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the Packers receivers, look at their relative strengths and weaknesses, and talk about how they all fit into Matt LaFleur's offense. And I am going to rank them based on how I view them as players on a fairly limited sample size, but I want to be clear, I think my top 3 at least will be high quality starters. The gap between them at this point is very thin, and if the actual order ended up being the exact opposite of how I have them ranked, that would not surprise me at all. And they all have very complementary skill sets that mesh well together and should have no problem coexisting. Now, Christian Watson, who is going to come in at 4th in my overall power rankings, is more of a wild card, and we're going to spend less time on him than my top 3 because I think Watson's a bit more of a known quantity. He's had a very up and down career so far. He's dealt with recurring hamstring injuries, which he's made an effort to fix this offseason. He learned that he had a 20% difference in muscle strength between his right and left legs, which puts more strain on the left hamstring since it has to overcompensate. And according to an ESPN article, which I'll link in the description, as of May 24th, he's gotten that difference down to 8 to 10%. So hopefully that resolves the issue and he's able to stay on the field. Because of the health concerns, I view Christian Watson as more of just icing on the cake. He has the potential and has had flashes of production, but it's hard to be too confident in him being a consistent contributor. Evaluating him on the field though, he's a very specialized player through his first 2 seasons. He's built in a lab from a size speed perspective, and he's proven to be an excellent deep threat. He can create instant vertical separation and get over the top of man coverage in just a few steps. I don't think the Packers have a receiver with Watson's level of downfield explosiveness and ability to generate big plays, but he hasn't developed into a complete receiver that can win reliably in the short to intermediate game, and that's why you see a lot of peaks and valleys in his production on a week-to-week basis. He'll have 5 catches, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns one week, and then have a stretch of games where he goes 2 for 20. You just don't see the route running precision to get open against man coverage and have that consistent, reliable production. Looking at his data from Reception Perception, which is a great resource, Matt Harmon charts every route over an 8-game sample and comes up with success rate data for a bunch of receivers, and Christian Watson was above 50th percentile in success rate on posts, corners, and goes, the 3 deepest routes you can run, but he was below 40th percentile in everything else, and his overall success rate against man coverage was in the 16th percentile. So he's not a player you can rely on to be the number 1 option for your passing game right now, but he could still develop as a route runner, and in the meantime, he's a really good complementary piece that can create explosive plays. You just don't know exactly when those plays are going to come. At 3, I've got Jayden Reed, 2nd round pick in 2023, and he was the Packers' primary slot receiver last year. Over 75% of his routes were from the slot. His statistical profile is pretty solid. He ranked in the top half of the league in most metrics, with contested catch rate as the main outlier, and that's the primary thing he needs to improve heading into year 2. But outside of that, Reed is an extremely well-rounded receiver. I think everyone in this top 3 is a good route runner in different ways, but Reed was a very consistent separator, especially on in-breaking routes. This graphic shows his route tree from last year. The rank column is where they rank in route percentage out of the top 100 qualifying receivers. He ran a lot of outs and posts, and he had the highest percentage of crossers and deep overs in the NFL at 13.3%. He had the 10th highest seam rate in the NFL, which is going to be the primary deep route route for slot receivers, and he was also the Packers' main gadget player with a good amount of screens and jet sweeps. As a route runner, I don't think he's the most dynamic or explosive athlete, but he's very efficient with his footwork and overall separated at a high level, especially for a rookie. You see right here, he wins against Brian Branch on the quick slant. I think Christian Watson was also supposed to run a slant here, and it makes this a much tighter window throw than it had to be, but really good job using these foot fire stutter steps to threaten the outside release. He bounces off of that outside plant foot, explodes into his break, and makes a really nice catch in traffic for the touchdown. Probably my favorite route from Jayden Reed last year is this deep out against a Caleb Evans. They got him in the cheat motion so he can build up speed. From his release point off the line of scrimmage, he stems this route in a straight line down the field. He's selling an in-breaking route by stemming this right down the numbers. You can see a Caleb Evans gradually start to turn his hips to face the inside, and then at the break point, he throttles down with a bunch of stutter steps, which makes this look like a stop route or an in-breaking comeback. That deceleration causes a Caleb Evans to break on the route and take a few steps forward, and Reed efficiently breaks outside and creates a ton of separation. Playing so much in the slot, he didn't face a ton of press coverage, but I actually thought he was pretty effective in a limited sample size. For an undersized receiver, he's listed at 187. He had much better play strength as a route runner and as a ball carrier than you would expect. You did see the lack of size show up at the catch point, but he was able to overcome that in some other phases. This is a great rep against New Orleans. Basically just bull rushes the press coverage. He walks Alontae Taylor back, gets him off balance, and then really good burst out of his break. And then he also showed to be a good deep threat from the slot. He ran in the 4.4s, doesn't have elite speed, but enough to win vertically on seam routes. The Packers have other receivers that you probably want as your primary deep threats, but you can't just squat on the underneath stuff with Jayden Reed. He can punish you down the field. He was a very productive gadget player. He had 128 rushing yards, which was the third most among receivers last season, and it was really a bit more than that because he took a lot of jet sweeps that got charted as a reception but are a lot closer to a run. The jet sweep and jet motion that comes along with it is a huge aspect of Matt LaFleur's offense, and he usually had pretty good blocking but still has the speed and vision to execute on those plays, and he also has pretty good power after the catch for a receiver in the 180s. I said his best route was in that second Vikings matchup. I also think he had his best overall play in that game. He gets open on a quick slant from a bunch formation, breaks the tackle from the corner and Harrison Smith, and then he powers through Josh Metellus and a Caleb Evans and gets into the end zone. Winning at the catch point is the main area you want to see some development from Jayden Reed. In college, he was actually much better in contested catch situations than you would expect. His final 3 seasons at Michigan State, he had a 56% contested catch rate, but in his rookie year, he was 3 for 12 on contested targets, which ranked near the bottom of the NFL. And there were a lot of really good routes last year that he just couldn't convert and finish at the catch point. I love this route against Chicago. It's 3rd and 2. He's got soft press coverage from the slot. He closes the cushion and then accelerates into his stem. Not even 5 yards downfield, he's stacked Kyler Gordon. He's got him in trail position. And because he's got about a yard of vertical separation, that causes Kyler Gordon to panic and start to really try to recover down the field. And he stacked him enough that he doesn't have a point of contact to feel out the route break. So at about 10 yards, he sinks his hips, cuts off his route. Gordon's leaning downfield, trying to recover. He doesn't have hand placement established, so he drifts away from the break, and the ball placement's a little bit behind him. He ends up having to work back to the football, but he doesn't do a good enough job attacking the ball in the air, and that gives Kyler Gordon the opportunity to get back into the picture. There were a couple plays where he was trying to track the ball over his shoulder and just let it bounce off his hands. Right here, he does a good job of separating on this circus route against Brian Branch. I like the head fakes at the top of his route to get Branch leaning inside before he breaks, but then he just can't track the ball. And then this play against Alontae Taylor, again, head fake inside before he breaks out to the sideline. He's able to separate, but can't fully extend for this, and it falls off his fingertips. This play, the Vikings are showing a zero blitz, as always, but they've got Josh Metellus dropping into the deep middle as the pull runner. Jayden Reed's running a seam. He's got a couple steps of separation down the field. The pass ends up behind him, so he's got to adjust to the football, but Metellus wins at the catch point and gets the interception. And then right here against the Chargers, it's 3rd and 7. He's running this stop route against off coverage. He can't really box out the defender because he's playing with too much cushion, and he does a good job extending for this and attacking the ball in the air, but the corner's able to reach into his catch space and he can't secure the catch through contact. This is my scouting report for Jayden Reed. 50 is league average, so anything above 50 I think is a strength. For the most part, I think he's a technically sound route runner, but he's more of an above average athlete, so you'd like him to continue to improve there to separate against better NFL corners, but a very balanced skill set overall. The main thing that's lacking based on his rookie tape is contested catches. Probably never going to be elite in that phase, but he did show much better efficiency in college, so hopefully he can at least partially return to form. I went back and forth on my 1 and 2, but I ended up going with Dontayvion Wicks as the second best receiver. The Packers took him in the 5th round last year, and he was the 3rd most productive receiver on the team with 605 yards and 5 touchdowns, but his per snap numbers were outstanding. Top half of the league in everything, and top 10 in first down percentage, EPA per target, success rate, and passer rating. And he's gotten a lot of hype this offseason, especially from fantasy football people. It's hard for me to be too confident in any of these receivers from a fantasy perspective because there's so many mouths to feed. But as far as being a good player, I'm absolutely on board with the Dontayvion Wicks hype train. His route tree is pretty standard, honestly. He had the 2nd highest out route percentage in the NFL. Any outside receiver in a Matt LaFleur offense is going to run a lot of digs, and that was his most frequently run route last year at 17.5%. He has good size, big catch radius. He can play all 3 receiver positions. He can win against press coverage. Very effective route runner that knows how to manipulate corners and is just a natural separator. He fell in the draft mainly because he just couldn't catch anything in his final year at Virginia, but he had a 4.7% drop rate as a rookie. Anything below 5% is really good for a receiver. And what surprised me the most based on his college tape was how good he was after the catch. I don't remember him as an overly dynamic player with the ball in his hands, but he was really tough to bring down, and he has a good combination of power and elusiveness as a runner. His one limitation is speed. He ran a 4.62, and he isn't someone that's going to outrun corners in a straight line, but outside of that, he has such a complete skill set and could easily end up being the best receiver from this group if he gets more opportunities. So he played a good amount of snaps at X and was great against press coverage as a rookie, especially on slants. There are times he's just untouchable releasing off the line of scrimmage. According to his reception perception data, he had a 90th percentile success rate on slant routes. This play against Chicago, you see how fluid and graceful he is with his release footwork. The corner's in outside leverage, and Wicks attacks that leverage with a quick jab step to the outside, gets the corner leaning back on his heels. Wicks breaks inside, and as he's accelerating through his break, he's able to retract his body and protect his frame from the recovery punch. The corner can't make contact, and Wicks leaves him in the dust. Another great job here against New Orleans of threatening the outside release to get the corner leaning and then timing up his break with the inside hand punch to avoid contact and separate over the middle. And then this play, he doesn't have as much space to work with, but in a phone booth, he still minimizes the contact and prevents the corner from landing a firm punch. He keeps his hands active to protect his frame, takes the inside release that the corner's giving him, and then he powers through the holding to win separation inside. And I just love watching Dontayvion Wicks run routes down the field. Going back to his reception perception data, he had a 92nd and 96th percentile success rate on outs and corners. Based on my tape study, I probably thought he was a little bit better on digs, but other than that, this table is very descriptive of what the film looks like. Something the Packers coaches clearly drill into their receivers is what's called the rocker step. It's a technique for separating at the top of usually digs, outs, posts, and corners. You're going to take a step towards your break, take a step away from your break, and then break. So at the top of your route, it should look like your body's rocking back and forth. Good example here against LA. He's running an out route. At the top of the route, he steps with the outside foot, the inside foot, and then breaks outside. Most route breaks are going to be a single move break. So you fake one way and then break in the opposite direction. When he steps with the outside foot and then starts to break inside, that looks like he's setting up a dig route. And then just the act of staggering your footwork in a bunch of different directions has the effect of freezing the corner at the top of the route. And you can see he just leaves this corner in quicksand, creates easy separation, but he can implement the same strategy when it comes to winning over the middle of the field. This touchdown from the wild card game against Dallas, I think I've seen like 3 film breakdowns on YouTube breaking down this specific play, but Jordan Love identifies the zero blitz. He calls Tucker Kraft into pass block. He audibles to a double post concept with a switch release. You can see the Cowboys corners on the right side of the field. Initially, they're playing with really heavy inside leverage, but the switch release causes them them to pass off these routes. Now the outside corner, Stephon Gilmore, has outside leverage on an in-breaking route and no safety help over the middle. Wicks is going to spray release, meaning he's evening out his leverage, squares up with him as much as possible at the top of the route. He uses the rocker step where he jab steps inside, steps outside, and then breaks inside, and then it's a perfectly placed throw under pressure. Packers get the touchdown. This play, he doesn't actually get targeted out of his initial break, but he's running an in-breaker against off coverage. He gets to the top of the route, rocker step, freezes the corner, causes him to lose his footing. He doesn't get the ball initially out of his break, but Love escapes the pocket. Wicks does a good job of extending his route, and Love finds him in the end zone. And then this isn't really a rocker step, but just an outstanding play from week 2 against Atlanta. Wicks is in motion. Again, they're using the cheat motion so he can build up speed. He's in pretty much the ideal situation at the top of his route. He's running an in-breaking route, but he's got the corner fully turned to the sideline. So he throttles down, sells the comeback. That gets Trey Flowers to react and start to break on the route. And then he crosses his face over the middle, makes the catch, breaks the first tackle from Trey Flowers, and then evades Richie Grant, gets into the end zone. And like I said, Yak was one of the most pleasantly surprising aspects of Dontayvion Wicks' tape as a rookie. This play against the Chargers, he catches a 5-yard sit route. He's got a defender crashing down over the top, absorbs a huge hit, stays on his feet. The linebacker takes a bad angle. He avoids Asante Samuel, avoids Alohi Gilman, and overall gets about 30 yards after the catch in what should have been just a simple 5-yard gain. Right here, he takes a little slide route, breaks 2 tackles, gets some good yards after the catch. You see this play against Chicago. He takes the screen pass, plants his foot, makes the first defender miss. He might get caught from behind by the time he's 25 to 30 yards down the field, but I think Dontayvion Wicks is going to add a lot of value after the catch. And then also got to shout out his run blocking. He was the one Packers receiver that really stood out in that area. Outstanding block here against Denver on a crack toss play, drives this defensive back to the sideline, puts him on his back, and then he also had a couple nice blocks clearing the way on the goal line or in the red zone. So for Wicks' scouting report, when it comes to route running and press coverage, I think he's the best of the Packers receivers. He's also up there with Jayden Reed after the catch. It's hard to really compare them because Jayden Reed got so many more opportunities to create with the ball in his hands. He had 3 fumbles, and dating back to college, he had 3 in his last 2 seasons at Virginia. So that is going to be his lowest rated skill. The other main weakness or limitation is speed. Like I said, not going to be someone that wins consistently on go routes. And with such a small sample size, it's just hard to tell what he's going to look like on contested targets. He was 3 for 7 last year, improved his hands on open catches from his last year in college, but we'll see if the drop issue pops back up. But if I had to pick one Packers receiver that I'm most confident in, I gotta go with Romeo Doubs, and that's not the conclusion I was expecting to come to before I got into his film from last year. Doubs was a 4th round pick in 2022, and I wasn't blown away by his rookie tape, but in 2023, he ended up leading the team in receiving yards and touchdowns with 908 and 9, and I actually see a lot of Nico Collins in his game. I think he has the potential to become a true number 1. His per snap statistical profile is less impressive than Reed and Wicks, but still solid. Very good contested catch rate, top 25 in first down and success rate, but definitely the worst after the catch out of the top 3. And his route tree is pretty similar to Dontayvion Wicks. Like I said, any outside receiver in this offense is going to run a lot of digs. Almost 1/5 of Dobbs' routes last year were dig routes, and he had the 4th highest dig rate in the NFL. But the key differences are fades, which made up 11% of his routes and ranked 6th league-wide. He was also their primary double move receiver, which I think is one of the strengths of his game. He's 6'2", 201 with over 32-inch arms, so ideal size for an X. He was injured during the pre-draft process, so he didn't test at the combine, but I think he's probably a bit faster than Jayden Reed and definitely faster than Wicks. I really like him as a deep threat, and unless Christian Watson's in the game, he's the player I want getting the shot targets down the field. He has the best ball skills of anyone on Green Bay's roster. He's so physical and skilled at the catch point. He can overpower smaller corners on jump balls, track the ball through contact, and use his length to high point and pluck it out of the air. And coming out of Nevada, he was more of a straight line receiver with limited ability as a route runner to separate out of horizontal breaks. But I was really surprised at his improvement in that area, and it's what allowed him to take such a massive jump in production from year 1 to year 2. The double moves are what what really caused me to lean forward in my chair when I was going through Doubs' tape. He had a couple outstanding blaze out circus type of routes in the wild card game against Dallas. This play, he's matched up with Jordan Lewis. He takes a hard inside release and then starts to accelerate vertically down the field. He gets the corner in trail position with underneath leverage, gives a jab step away from his break at the top of the route, and then breaks out to the sideline wide open. And then somehow he creates even more separation on this route. Again, hard inside release, really selling the deep over here. Gilmore's trying to undercut this route. Doubs kind of pumps the brakes a little bit to get behind him and get him lost. And then a crisp break out to the sideline. He could have taken a nap before Gilmore caught up to him. Right here, he runs more of a traditional circus route where he's going to diagonal release inside. He starts to stem his route vertically, and then he breaks outside. The route diagram should look like the top third of an octagon. But on this play, you see the advantage of Doubs' size and play strength. Ward grabs onto him with the outside hand, but he's able to power through that contact, causes the corner to lose his footing, and because the safety took the over route from Jayden Reed, there's no safety help, and he's got wide open space after the catch. Good rep here against Trey Flowers, who was just getting cooked this entire game. Inside release, converts it to a vertical stem, stacks the receiver down the field, gets the corner into trail, and then good job using head fakes to extend the separation out of his break. The pass is overthrown, but I believe this was called a holding penalty. At least it should have been. And then like we discussed with Dontayvion Wicks, the Packers receivers love using rocker steps at the top of the route. Not going to break down every example for Doubs because we went into a lot of plays for Wicks, but this play from the divisional round, he's running a deep out. Thomas has outside leverage, but he's in a full side turn pointed away from Doubs' break, and Doubs takes an outside step, inside step, breaks outside, and he's wide open to the sideline. And then this play, you see him use a rocker step to separate on an in-breaking route. He's got Eddie Jackson on a late rotation, and he's facing about as heavy of inside leverage as you could possibly see. I mean, 3 yards shaded inside. To be able to separate on an in-breaking route against this kind of coverage look is incredible. He's squared up with the back of the end zone, plants the outside foot, explodes into the inside break, and gets the touchdown. He's also very good against press. I think much improved there from college. He has the straight line explosiveness. He's got the size and play strength to absorb some contact, but the footwork and movement efficiency, I think, has really developed from what I remember from his Nevada tape. And I think he's probably the best stop route runner that the Packers have. With his size and speed, it's really impressive, his ability to sink his hips quickly, cut off those curls and comebacks. Right here, you see straight line explosiveness off the line of scrimmage, a couple steps into his route. He's high on the outside hip, threatening vertically down the sideline. Once he gets the corner, Michael Davis, to fully turn and run, he sits down, 2 throttle steps, and he's completely cut off his route. Davis does a solid job recovering here, but Doubs is able to box him out and make a nice contested catch. This play, he's got Jamel Dean in a side turn. He attacks his blind spot. He accelerates and gets behind him, gets outside of his field of vision. So for all Jamel Dean knows, he's just running a go route down the sideline. That causes Dean to drift downfield. He cuts off his route and gets plenty of separation. And I really like this 7 stop against LA. A 7 stop is just a corner, which is 7, and then a stop route. So he stems vertically, diagonal break into the corner route, and then he actually sells this even further by turning his route upfield and applying that vertical pressure to get the corner back on his heels, and then he cuts it off and moves the chains on 3rd and 17. His main weakness as a route runner is slants against press coverage. He doesn't really have the timing down and doesn't consistently explode out of his release into the route. With a quick slant, you're in tight quarters, so when you win an edge with your release, you've got to be urgent separating horizontally. Of any route, that's the one where you absolutely can't afford to round your cuts or drift in and out of breaks. But what completes Romeo Doubs as a player, and another area that he showed a lot of improvement from year 1, is catching the football. He cut his drop rate in half, going from 10.1 to 5.6%, and he raised his contested catch rate from 33 to 54. He has the natural ability to be one of the premier contact catch receivers in the NFL with his size and catch radius, but it's his ball tracking, focus, and technique at the catch point that has allowed him to approach that potential. He does a great job adjusting to slightly inaccurate or difficult throws deep down the field. I really like the design and execution of this play against New Orleans. They're sending Alontae Taylor on the slot blitz, so Romeo Doubs runs his route towards the void and flashes his hands like he's the side adjust ready for a quick throw. That gets the safety to bite down and try to break on this route, and then Doubs accelerates vertically and basically runs a stop and go here. He draws a holding penalty as the DB's trying to recover, but it doesn't matter because Doubs makes an incredible adjustment to the ball down the sideline, fingertip catch over his shoulder. This play, the Chargers have a coverage bust in the secondary. Doubs is wide open down the seam, but the ball's a little bit behind him. There's a chance Michael Davis could make a play on this if Doubs wasn't aggressive attacking the football. He reaches back, rips it out of the air. When a DB has his back to the quarterback, he's reading the receiver's body language. So the moment Doubs starts to play the ball, he's going to reach up and try to rake it out. Doubs does a great job of securing the catch and then immediately pulling it away into his frame, shielding the corner from the ball. This play against the Broncos, he wins the jump ball over Pat Surtain. They both get hands on it, but Doubs comes out of the pile with control, and then he can just post somebody up in the back corner of the end zone and come down with a goal line fade. Great job here against Chicago to get the touchdown on Tyreek Stevenson. And then this rep against the Saints, really good adjustment to the back shoulder fade. So I was honestly sleeping on Romeo Doubs before I started making this video, but I'm now a believer. I think there's still some room for improvement as a separator, but after watching his last year of college and his rookie year in the NFL, he was a fine receiver, but I never really saw much of a dynamic route running skill set. 2023, he took a major step forward, and I'm very optimistic that he can take a similar jump and be talked about somewhere in the DK Metcalf to T. Higgins tier of receiver, which I know is a hot take. And when you look at the Packers receiver room as a whole, they have a really well-balanced blend of skill sets. Doubs is the X that can beat press, win at the catch point, and eventually run the entire route tree at a high level, I think. Wicks is kind of the do-it-all Z, but he can play every position, and honestly, he's so green and inexperienced in terms of usage and development, I don't even want to put him in a box. Matt LaFleur comparing him to Davante Adams is definitely bold, and I probably wouldn't make that comp, but he wasn't just purely blowing smoke. I think the tape speaks for itself, and there's a ton of upside. Jayden Reed is the well-rounded slot, efficient route runner, good deep threat, productive with the ball in his hands. If he can recapture some of that strength at the catch point he showed in college, he could become one of the better slot receivers in the NFL. And then with Christian Watson, you're playing with house money. Whenever he's healthy, he's a high volatility, big play, deep threat. If he can figure out the hamstring and be on the field consistently, that's great as your third or fourth option, but there's still upside that he can develop as a route runner and actually be a complete receiver that runs a more diverse route tree. He has decent change of direction skills for his size. He's just got to improve his footwork and technique. You tack on Bo Melton, Samori Toure, Malik Heath, who have all shown flashes at certain points. I've never seen a team be set up for the future like the Packers are at wide receiver, where they have one of the deepest rooms in the NFL, but everyone on the roster is in their first or second year. And Brian Gutekunst deserves a ton of credit. He took a lot of valid criticism for neglecting or failing to address this position during Aaron Rodgers' prime, but he isn't making the same mistake with Jordan Love.